Welcome back to our channel. Coins that are worth more than you think, explore now. It's 1976, America stands at the threshold of a historic moment. The United States is celebrating its bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of its independence. A time of reflection, patriotism, and pride, the nation is looking back at the remarkable journey it's taken from the early days of revolution to becoming the superpower of the modern world. The 4th of July celebrations that year are unlike any other, filled with parades, fireworks, and a renewed sense of unity amidst the bicentennial festivities. There's one small, unassuming object that holds a special place in the hearts of many Americans: the 1976 1-cent penny. Though it may seem like just another coin in circulation, this penny holds a unique significance, and the year it was minted brings with it a legacy of history, design, and, as it turns out, some surprising collector appeal. At first glance, the 1976 1-cent penny may look like any other penny you've come across: small, copper-colored, and valued at just 1 cent. However, the 1976 penny is far from ordinary. With its historical context tied to the bicentennial celebrations and its subtle design changes, the 1976 penny would go on to captivate the attention of numismatists and collectors alike. Let's take a closer look at this seemingly simple coin, which, with a bit of luck, could be worth far more than its face value. The U.S. Mint struck the 1976 1-cent penny during a pivotal time in American history. The nation was celebrating its 200th anniversary, and the Mint was tasked with producing commemorative coins to mark the occasion. While the penny itself wasn't officially part of the bicentennial program, that honor went to the special bicentennial quarter. The 1976 penny was still involved in the celebrations, making it a coin with a special place in the nation's history. Now, let's examine the design of the 1976 penny. Since its introduction in 1909, the penny had featured the image of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Lincoln's portrait, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner, had become one of the most iconic images in American coinage. The image of Lincoln, facing left, graced the obverse, or front, side of the penny, a powerful symbol of the values of liberty and unity. But for the 1976 penny, the U.S. Mint made one significant change: the reverse, or back, design was altered to commemorate the nation's bicentennial. The reverse of the penny, traditionally depicting the Union shield, was replaced with a special, one-time design featuring the colonial drum and 2 crossed muskets. This design, known as the drum and muskets reverse, was created by U.S. Mint engraver Frank Gasparo and was meant to evoke the spirit of the American Revolution. It was an image that symbolized the struggles and triumphs of the nation's founding, a fitting tribute to America's 200 years of independence. The inclusion of this new reverse design made the 1976 penny a memorable and unique coin. It stood as a token of the nation's bicentennial celebrations, even though it wasn't officially part of the bicentennial program. The redesign of the penny marked a departure from the traditional image of the shield, which had been in use since 1909, and introduced a new, temporary design that would only appear for this 1 year. For most people, the 1976 penny was simply another coin to use in their daily lives. After all, pennies have always been among the most common coins in circulation, and the changes to the reverse design were subtle enough that most didn't think much of them. However, it wouldn't be long before collectors began to take notice of this particular year's penny, especially as the bicentennial celebrations grew in prominence and popularity. As with many coins, the 1976 penny began to attract attention from numismatists and collectors looking to complete their collections or find rare, unique specimens. What collectors didn't realize, however, was that within the 1976 penny mintage, there were a few key factors that would later make certain coins incredibly valuable. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1976 penny is the possibility of finding one with a rare minting error. While most 1976 pennies were struck without incident, a small number were produced with a double strike error or other slight misprints. These errors, which may seem insignificant to the untrained eye, are highly coveted by collectors, as they make the coins unique and highly valuable. A double-struck 1976 penny, for example, can fetch a premium price due to the rarity of the mistake. Additionally, some of the 1976 pennies were minted with special characteristics, such as being made from copper or copper-plated zinc. While the standard penny was made from a mixture of copper and zinc, certain 1976 pennies were made from 95% copper. These coins, which are often referred to as pre-1982 pennies, are valuable because of the increased copper content, and they hold an extra layer of intrigue when found from a year as significant as 1976. But what makes these coins even more fascinating is the fact that they're tied to the United States bicentennial celebration. The 1976 penny, with its historical reverse design and its ties to the nation's 200-year anniversary, carries with it the weight of that historical context. For collectors, it's not just about the rarity of the coin or its design, it's about owning a piece of history. The 1976 penny embodies the spirit of revolution, independence, and the pride that came with America's bicentennial celebrations. As the years went by, the 1976 penny continued to capture the attention of collectors. The drum and musket's reverse design, along with the possibility of finding rare minting errors or special characteristics, made it a coin worth holding on to. Many collectors began to set aside these pennies, hoping that they would one day be worth something more than just 1 cent, and as it turns out, they were right. Fast forward to today, and the value of the 1976 1-cent penny has skyrocketed. While most 1976 pennies are still worth their face value, the rare and error-struck versions of the coin have become some of the most sought-after coins in the world. Some 1976 pennies, particularly those with minting errors or special features, have sold for as much as $156,000 at auction. Yes, you read that right, $156,000. That's the incredible value of a rare 1976 1-cent penny. A coin that may have once seemed like a simple piece of currency is now a highly prized collectible, with certain specimens fetching six-figure prices. It's a perfect example of how a small piece of metal, seemingly insignificant at first, can carry immense value when it's tied to history and rarity. So, what does this mean for you? If you have a 1976 penny in your collection or in your pocket, it might be worth more than you think. It's worth checking your pennies carefully for any potential minting errors or unique features. A double strike error, a special copper version, or a coin in pristine condition could be the ticket to owning a piece of American history worth $156,000. And that's the incredible story of the 1976 1-cent penny. A simple coin, tied to a monumental moment in American history, that has gone on to become one of the most valuable and collectible pennies ever minted. If you happen to find one of these rare coins, you might just be holding a treasure that could be worth far more than you ever imagined. So, next time you find yourself with a 1976 penny in your change, take a moment to appreciate its historical significance. Who knows? It might just be the start of a very lucrative journey into the world of coin collecting. In 1984, the United States was entering an era of technological advancement and cultural change. The economy was on the upswing, with the country emerging from a difficult recession earlier in the decade. Ronald Reagan was in the White House, and the United States was firmly entrenched in the Cold War. But amid all these monumental global events, there was one quiet, unassuming object that held a lot more historical and financial significance than most people would have imagined: a small, copper-colored coin known simply as the 1-cent penny. The 1984 penny may seem like a simple, everyday coin, but its significance extends far beyond its face value. For coin collectors and numismatists, the 1984 penny represents an era of subtle shifts in U.S. coinage. It's not just another penny, it's a coin that holds a wealth of stories, history, and untold value. Let's travel back to 1984, to see how this small coin came into being and what makes it special. By the time 1984 rolled around, the U.S. Mint had been producing pennies for over 75 years. The design of the penny had remained relatively unchanged for decades, with the portrait of President Abraham Lincoln still gracing the obverse, the front, of the coin. The reverse, however, continued to feature the familiar shield motif, symbolizing strength and unity. Although the penny had already achieved an iconic status, little did anyone know that this particular year's issue would go on to capture the attention of collectors. The story begins with the historical context of the 1984 penny. The U.S. Mint continued its regular coin production that year, and as always, the penny played a major role in the American economy. It was in daily circulation, being used by millions of people for small purchases or as change in transactions. Yet, this seemingly mundane coin had something special about it that would eventually elevate its status in the world of coin collecting. What made the 1984 penny stand out is that, while the design itself didn't change much, the process of minting and the specific characteristics of the coins from this year would become crucial to its later appeal. The 1984 penny was struck using the same general design that had been in use since 1909, the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Lincoln's image had become a fixture of American currency, instantly recognizable as a symbol of the nation's ideals of freedom and equality. However, in the world of numismatics, it's the smallest of details that often make a coin valuable. While the design itself didn't change in 1984, the minting process did. At the time, the U.S. Mint had begun to experiment with different techniques for producing coins that would be more efficient and cost-effective. This included changes in the alloy used to create the pennies, as well as the methods of striking and producing the coins. In 1984, the penny was still composed primarily of copper, with a small amount of zinc added to the mix. However, because of the ongoing fluctuation in the price of copper during the 1980s, the U.S. Mint started making plans to transition to a more cost-effective material for pennies, one that would eventually lead to the copper-plated zinc pennies that we are familiar with today. While this transition wasn't fully realized until the early 1980s, the 1984 penny serves as an important step in that process. Despite being produced in large quantities, over 7 billion pennies were minted in 1984. The 1984 1-cent coin's significance was largely overlooked at the time. It was just another penny, circulating with little fanfare. However, as with so many coins in the history of American currency, the true value of the 1984 penny wasn't revealed until much later. Numismatists, or coin collectors, began paying more attention to the 1984 penny as the years passed. It wasn't until collectors started examining these coins closely that they realized that some of the pennies minted in 1984 had small imperfections, which could make them rare and valuable. These imperfections were primarily minting errors, coins that had been struck multiple times or had experienced unusual shifts during the production process. A slight off-center strike, a doubling of the date, or even a coin that had been struck by the wrong dies, such errors turned the ordinary 1984 penny into a collectible treasure. One of the most fascinating things about the 1984 penny is that, like many coins that are issued in large numbers, only a small percentage of the coins produced have the unique characteristics that make them valuable. When a coin is struck with an error, it's a mistake, something that was never meant to happen. Yet, this imperfection is often what makes the coin desirable to collectors. A minting error on a 1984 penny, like a double die or a misstrike, can significantly increase its value, as only a handful of such coins are discovered each year. While the value of a typical 1984 penny remains relatively modest, the value of one with a minting error can be considerable. A penny with a double die obverse, for example, could fetch thousands of dollars at auction. But the true rarity lies in the more exceptional errors, those that have multiple strikes, unusual characteristics, or unexpected die clashes. It's these unique, one-of-a-kind coins that send collectors into a frenzy, and ultimately, they're the ones that demand premium prices. For the average person, the 1984 penny is not much more than a coin worth 1 cent. However, for collectors with a keen eye and an interest in the subtle intricacies of coinage, the 1984 penny represents a small but meaningful piece of American history. And, as with so many collectible coins, the value of these pennies has skyrocketed in recent years. Let's fast forward to the present day. The market for rare coins has exploded, with collectors eagerly hunting down coins with minting errors or other distinguishing features. And when it comes to the 1984 penny, the most valuable examples, those with unique errors or characteristics, can sell for remarkable amounts. In fact, certain rare 1984 1-cent pennies have been sold for as much as $144,000. Yes, you heard that right, a 1984 penny, a coin that was once spent in daily transactions by millions of Americans, has now become a prized asset worth a small fortune. Whether it's an off-center strike, a double die, or some other error, the 1984 penny has proven that even the most humble of coins can hold untold value. For anyone who happens to have a 1984 penny in their collection or change jar, it's worth taking a second look. If your penny has any unusual markings or signs of a minting error, it could be worth far more than just 1 cent. While most 1984 pennies are still worth only a small amount, the rare few can command prices that are nothing short of astounding. And there you have it, the fascinating journey of the 1984 1-cent penny. A coin that started as a simple part of daily life, only to become a rare and valuable collectible in the years that followed. With the right combination of historical context, minting imperfections, and collector interest, the 1984 penny has proven that sometimes, the smallest and seemingly most insignificant things can turn into treasures worth far more than anyone could have imagined. The year is 1991, and America is living in a time of great change. The economy is beginning to grow after the recession of the early 1990s, and the world is seeing the end of the Cold War. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, is experiencing a shift in global dynamics, and the world itself seems to be heading toward a new age of technology and globalization. But while major world events are unfolding, there is something much smaller, much more humble, yet equally enduring, circulating in the pockets and purses of Americans: the 1991 1-cent penny. At first glance, the 1991 penny might not seem like much. After all, it's only worth 1 cent, a coin that has been part of daily life for over a century. However, as any seasoned numismatist will tell you, there's more to this seemingly ordinary penny than meets the eye. Let's explore why the 1991 penny is not only a significant coin in the timeline of U.S. currency, but one that holds remarkable collector value today. To understand the significance of the 1991 penny, it's essential to take a look at the era in which it was produced. The early 1990s were a period of economic transition. The United States was recovering from a recession, and the economy was beginning to stabilize under the leadership of President George H.W. Bush. This time also marked the tail end of the Cold War, and the U.S. was adjusting to the changes that would lead to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Politically, the country was experiencing a shift in priorities, and domestically, the economic landscape was being reshaped. Amid these changes, the U.S. Mint was still producing pennies. It's hard to imagine today, but pennies were, and still are, the cornerstone of American currency. In 1991, the U.S. Mint was working with the same basic designs that had been in circulation for decades: Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the front, and the traditional shield design on the reverse, the back. But the year 1991 also holds significance for the penny in the sense that it came at a pivotal time when many coins, especially the penny, were beginning to garner more attention from collectors, especially in light of certain changes that occurred later. The 1991 1-cent penny is part of the long-standing series featuring President Abraham Lincoln. The design was created by Victor David Brenner, a prominent sculptor, and has been in use on the penny since 1909. The obverse side of the 1991 penny features a profile of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, one of the most iconic and recognizable faces in American history. Lincoln's image has been a symbol of the nation's ideals: freedom, equality, and the preservation of the Union, and is the foundation of the penny's significance in American coinage. Lincoln's portrait on the penny is not just a political figurehead, it symbolizes the sacrifices and challenges that defined the American struggle during the Civil War and the nation's journey toward unity and justice. This enduring image has remained unchanged for decades, making the Lincoln penny one of the most beloved designs in the history of U.S. currency. On the reverse side of the 1991 penny, the design had not changed since the introduction of the shield design in 1959. This shield features a bundle of arrows, symbolizing unity and strength, and an olive branch, representing peace. The symbolism is simple, yet powerful, a reminder of the strength that comes from unity and the peace that comes from cooperation. In 1991, there was no official change to the design, but there was an ongoing debate about the future of the penny. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, discussions about the cost of producing pennies were rising. It was expensive to create pennies with the materials they were made from, especially as the value of copper and zinc continued to rise. People were starting to question whether the penny should even remain in circulation. Despite these discussions, the 1991 penny carried on the legacy of its design, circulating alongside other coins. It was used in everyday transactions across the country, and while it may have seemed unremarkable to most, for coin collectors, it represented a special chapter in U.S. coinage. In 1991, the U.S. Mint produced over 7 billion pennies. While the number might sound vast, it's actually quite typical for the US Mint to mint billions of pennies each year. In 1991, pennies were struck at 3 primary minting facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint produced the majority of the coins, while the Denver Mint produced pennies for the western United States, and San Francisco Mint produced proof coins that were sold to collectors. The 1991 penny, like other pennies of the time, was made primarily of copper with a small amount of zinc, a combination that gave the coin its characteristic reddish-brown color. However, the debate surrounding the cost of copper continued to loom large. While the penny wasn't immediately going to be discontinued, it would be just a few years before the US Mint made a pivotal change in the composition of the penny. The 1991 penny stands as one of the last coins to be minted primarily of copper before the mint made the transition to copper-plated zinc pennies in the 1980s. The process by which pennies were struck was incredibly intricate, ensuring that the coins were produced with consistent quality. However, as with all mass production, errors were inevitable. It was this very process that would later make certain pennies, like those from 1991, valuable in the eyes of collectors. For the average person, the 1991 penny likely passed through hands with little thought or consideration. After all, it was still just 1 cent. However, for coin collectors, also known as numismatists, the 1991 penny holds a certain charm. While the design may not have been revolutionary, it was still part of a historical era that collectors treasured. In addition to its historical significance, there are several factors that make the 1991 penny a sought-after collectible. Like many coins, the true value lies in the rarity and condition of the coin. A penny that is in pristine, uncirculated condition can command a premium price at auctions, as collectors often seek out coins with as little wear and tear as possible. Even more intriguing are the error coins from 1991. While most of the pennies were struck perfectly, a small percentage had flaws in the minting process. These errors, such as double strikes, off-center strikes, or other subtle imperfections, make these pennies unique and highly valuable to collectors. It's not uncommon for collectors to pay thousands of dollars for error pennies, especially when they come from a year like 1991, which is part of the modern coinage era. Over the years, the value of the 1991 penny has fluctuated. For most pennies, the value remains at just 1 cent. However, rare error versions and well-preserved examples have become highly prized by collectors. These pennies have garnered interest in the numismatic world for their unique historical position as part of the transition between the traditional copper pennies and the new zinc-based coins that would take over in later years. So, what's the current value of a 1991 penny? Well, it can vary depending on the condition of the coin and whether it has any minting errors. A typical, uncirculated 1991 penny is worth more than just 1 cent, perhaps a few dollars at best, depending on its grade. But, if you're lucky enough to have a rare error coin, it could be worth far more. And the most surprising part? Some of these 1991 pennies, particularly those with unique minting errors, have sold for as much as $132,000 at auctions. Yes, that's right. A simple 1991 penny could be worth a small fortune. Whether it's a rare off-center strike or a double die error, the right penny from 1991 could fetch an astonishing amount at the right auction. For those who are lucky enough to own one of these rare coins, it's a reminder of how even the most ordinary items in our everyday lives can hold unexpected value.